Have you ever wondered what secrets lie buried beneath the most sacred place on earth? Not relics, not bones, but a prison, sealed for millennia by popes and saints, guarded by silence and shadow. What if I told you that beneath the splendor of the Vatican lies a truth so terrifying it was hidden not to protect it from us, but to protect us from it? That one night, the seals cracked, the darkness stirred, and something ancient, older than the church, older than Rome, began to whisper again. This is not just a story, this is a warning. Read on if you dare. Welcome to Tales of Mythology, where ancient legends, forgotten horrors, and supernatural wars come to life. If you love exploring the untold side of mythology, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell below, so you never miss another legendary story. Midnight cloaked the Vatican in a silence so deep, it seemed the stones themselves held their breath. Beneath the weight of centuries, the marble corridors pulsed with unseen tension. The scent of wax and incense lingered, but beneath it, fainter, yet unmistakable, was something older, something buried, something awake. My footsteps echoed faintly as I descended. I had crossed continents for this moment, drawn not by faith but by something colder, a conviction that beneath this holy ground lay a truth the world could not bear. A tremor in the foundation, a breath exhaled from the bones of the earth, whispered my name with the dust. and I listened. Every stone in these walls had been touched by empire and blood. Beneath the modern Vatican, beneath the Renaissance and Baroque facades, deeper than Constantine's Basilica, the earth remembered what men chose to forget. My fingers brushed the wall, tracing the groove of some long-forgotten tool. The air shifted, damp, metallic, acrid, a scent not of time but of something left behind by it. I followed a hand-drawn map not found in any archive. It had been passed to me with trembling hands by a dying scholar in Geneva. He had muttered something before losing consciousness. There are rooms beneath the Vatican not marked by man, but by fear. That was weeks ago. His words had haunted me since. The path narrowed. Old Roman bricks gave way to foundations of another age, ashlar blocks so old they seemed fused into the bedrock itself. I moved through the dark, lit only by the soft glow of a lantern swaying from my hand. As I passed beneath an arch suffocated by roots and dust, a subtle shift in the atmosphere made my skin tighten. It wasn't just the cold, it was presence. The floor vibrated, not enough to alarm, but enough to confirm what I feared. Something below was not asleep, and the closer I came, the more the air tasted of sulfur and iron. A living memory lingered in the stone, a warning. My breath slowed. I turned one final corner and stood before it. A massive door, oak blackened with age, wrapped in rusted iron, waited at the terminus of the tunnel. The surrounding stone was carved with dozens of languages: Latin, Aramaic, Greek, Hebrew, and beneath those, stranger marks, symbols no theology dared retain. Their edges shimmered in the lantern's glow, as though resisting clarity. The frame had been fused with melted lead, sealed with old Vatican sigils and exorcist brands. Someone's had ensured this door would never open. Not from the outside, and certainly not from within. I leaned close. The wood radiated warmth, an unnatural heat that did not come from fire, but from something deeper, something alive. Then, from behind the door, a sound, thud, a slow, deliberate pressure against the other side. Dust fell from the stone arch above. My chest tightened. I stepped back. Then it came again. Thud, heavier this time, followed by a low moan. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't wind. It was a voice. Flesh and sound tangled together in that subterranean howl. Not animal, not human. Something in between. Something that had forgotten the shape of its name, but not its hunger. The map had spoken of this door. The scholar had begged, if you find it, do not touch it. Some doors must never open. Some truths were not given to us. They were hidden to protect us from ourselves. I stepped forward anyway. I didn't believe in angels or devils, but I believed in what men fear enough to bury beneath a holy city. Whatever stood behind this door had once terrified popes into silence. Whatever pressed against its seals now had waited long enough. I reached out. My hand hovered over the markings. The door pulsed, slow and rhythmic like a dying heart. Then, under my breath, I whispered what I hoped would not be my last words. And in return, the thing on the other side whispered back. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Stop! The command echoed behind me, low and cracked with age. I whirled, lantern raised. A gaunt figure in a black cassock stood in the shadows, eyes covered by a yellowed bandage. One skeletal hand gripped a wooden rosary. He had approached so silently that even my keen ears caught nothing until he spoke. "You should not be here," the old man said. I noted how his fingers twitched on the crucifix at his breast. Dust and cold ash clung to his robe, as if he had kept vigil in these depths for a lifetime. "No harm," I replied softly. "Are you the guardian of this place?" He gave a bitter laugh. "Guardian. A poor guardian I make, yet here I remain." Whoever he was, he barred my path with surprising resolve. "Whoever you are, leave. These tunnels are not meant for the living to walk." I lifted my chin, resolve hardening. "My life has been long," I answered. "I have fought great evils before. I heard whispers of a great darkness bound beneath this holy place, and I could not turn aside." The blind man tilted his head at my words. He seemed to peer at me through his soiled bandage, as if somehow he could see beyond sight. You speak of things no outsider should know, he murmured. How did a stranger learn what the Vatican has buried? I hesitated, then said simply, Fate guides me. I followed ancient clues here, through forbidden texts and a friend's testimony. If you keep watch over it, please, tell me what you guard. He fell silent, lips moving in a soundless prayer. At last, he sighed. Perhaps you were sent here. After so many years, perhaps Providence brings a witness. He traced a trembling hand over the door's edge, where I now noticed carvings in the stone. Generations before me carved their prayers into these walls to steal their souls. Another heavy thud resounded from behind the door. The Guardian flinched. It occurred to me that he had probably heard that awful sound in his sleep for decades. He turned his face toward me. There is something here. Tell me, what do you think it is? I drew a breath. Something ancient and unholy, I said. Some claim it is Lilith, the first wife of Adam, who became a demon. Others say it is one of the Watchers, a fallen angel from before the flood, chained deep underground. At the name Lilith, the old man crossed himself. At Watcher, he bowed his head. We do not know its true name, he whispered. Over the years, many names have been whispered. Lilith, Azazel, Samael. All we know is that it is utterly evil and utterly captive for now. He took a shuddering breath and continued. Centuries ago, the Church discovered this abomination and built this prison around it. They swore the utmost secrecy and purged all record of the demon. Only the Pope and a few scholars knew the truth, passing it down in frightened whispers. They hid any scripture that spoke of it, but hiding a thing is not defeating it. The evil remained, festering beneath holy ground, while humanity went about its days above, blissfully ignorant. Anger and pity twisted in my heart at this mortal folly, hiding inconvenient truths and pretending the danger is gone. How often men seal away ancient horrors, only to forget and grow careless. The Guardian wiped a tear from his cheek. We prayed that day would not come, he sighed, to hold this horror imprisoned until the final trumpet, when God's host would deal with it. Gently, I rested a hand on his thin shoulder. You are not alone tonight. I will stand with you. He bowed his head in gratitude. Together we turned toward the great sealed door. A muffled pounding now pulsed steadily from behind it, methodical, like the heartbeat of a giant beast. Faint cracks zigzagged through the edges of the stonework. I felt an icy dread in my belly. It is growing stronger, I whispered. Yes, he said. The hour of its escape approaches. The chains strain more each day. I have fasted, prayed, anointed the threshold, yet still the bonds fray. Perhaps after so long the seal itself fails, or the bloodshed above has nourished the monster's strength. The Guardian opened a battered Bible on a small pedestal and found a passage by touch. Low Latin invocations tumbled from his lips, echoing in the chamber as he recited an ancient warning. His voice trembled, invoking the punishment of fallen angels. Finally he whispered the verse in English, "And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day." The blind monk's fervent prayer faded into silence. Only our breaths and a distant drip of water disturbed the tomb-like hush. The scripture he had spoken still rang in my ears as we knelt on the cold stone floor. That verse spoke of angels chained in darkness. Could it be about this creature, I ventured? That was from the Epistle of Jude, he replied, but older writings the Church suppressed tell even more about such fallen beings. With shaking hands, he reached into a crevice in the wall and withdrew a cracked parchment scroll. Here is the Book of Enoch, he murmured, a forbidden text the Church hid away. When terror plagued me, I read it to remember why I must keep watch. He offered me the scroll. My eyes cannot see the ink, but perhaps yours can. I know some passages by heart, yet to hear them aloud, that would be a comfort. The script was ancient, but by some gift I found I could decipher it. By lantern light I began to read, and the Guardian bowed his head to listen. A fragment of ancient scripture drifted through my mind, echoing that primeval age when corruption first spread upon the earth. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Even in the canon, only this cryptic memory remained of the Watchers' sin. The tale spoke of the Watchers, angels who forsook heaven and corrupted humankind. They taught forbidden arts and fathered giant offspring that filled the earth with bloodshed. Mankind's cries rose to heaven until the Most High sent archangels to intervene. One chief watcher named Azazel taught humans the secrets of warfare, sorcery, and other forbidden knowledge. Secrets of heaven that men were not meant to know, the scroll said. Because of Azazel's influence, the earth was corrupted and chaos reigned. A chill ran through me at how eerily this ancient horror mirrored the evils of our own history. The text described Raphael binding Azazel and casting him into utter darkness, imprisoned deep beneath the earth under rough stones and unyielding chains. He would lie in that lightless pit until the end of days. As I read those words, I felt a faint tremor under us, as if the being in the vault recognized its own story. I paused to catch my breath. The Guardian clutched my arm. Enoch describes this very place, he breathed. A prison of stone and steel, exactly as in the ancient vision. I nodded numbly. The text even promised that on the great day of judgment, Azazel would finally be cast into fire, but not before. Till that appointed time, he would remain in chains, and someone must stand guard. My blood turned to ice. Forever, the scroll said, until an appointed day beyond mortal reckoning, but perhaps that day was now at hand. Was the being behind this door straining at its chains because the prophesied end of days was approaching? The Guardian crossed himself. We always prayed that day would not come in our time, he sighed, to hold this horror imprisoned until the final trumpet, when God himself will cast it down. I lowered the scroll. This menace was beyond any foe I had ever faced. It was no mere sorcerer's shadow to be banished by sword or spell, but a primordial enemy of heaven itself, chained by angels and answerable only to the Creator at the end of time. If its appointed time is now, I whispered, what hope have we? We are just a man and an elf guarding what the hosts of heaven themselves bound. How can we hold back fate? The old man gripped my forearm with surprising strength. We resist because we must, he said fiercely. So long as we breathe, we hold the line. Final hour or not, our duty remains. If this is truly the end, then we will meet it fighting. His defiance lit a small ember in my heart. In this frail, blind monk burned a courage as profound as any hero on the battlefield. Mustering my resolve, I read aloud the ancient decree of Azazel's fate. Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudel, and cast him therein. And place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face, that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. For a heartbeat all was still. Then a deep reverberation rolled through the chamber, a sound felt more than heard. The very stones beneath us quivered. I shot to my feet, and the Guardian braced himself against the wall. The scroll of Enoch slipped from my fingers as the floor gave a sickening lurch. It's happening, I gasped. Far above us, I heard the muffled clamor of church bells erupting into life. St. Peter's bells, ringing out at an hour they should not. The unexpected pealing sent a jolt of recognition through the old monk. His lips moved in frantic prayer. With a thunderous crack, a long fissure tore across the vaulted ceiling, raining dust and grit. The door before us shuddered in its frame, as if pounded by an invisible battering ram. Mortar crumbled from the edges. I grabbed the Guardian's arm to steady him, but he broke free and staggered toward the door. "No!" I shouted, but he was already pressing both palms and his forehead against the adorned wood, praying in Latin at a fever pitch. I rushed to his side. A wave of blistering heat suddenly radiated from the door, forcing me back a step. The metal bands that reinforced the oak began to glow a dull red. I could smell the stench of melting lead and burning incense. The Guardian did not flinch. "Lord, steel our souls against the enemy," he cried, voice thin against a rising din beyond the door. From behind the stone, a cacophony began to build, a chorus of low droning howls and shrill, uncanny shrieks intermingled. The sound was like nails on my mind, and I clamped my hands over my ears. A blast of wind, foul and cold, burst from the widening cracks around the door's frame, snuffing out my lantern. In utter darkness, I reached blindly for the monk. "We must fall back," I yelled above the unearthly wail. My words were drowned as the door jolted outward another inch with a grinding screech. A slender fissure split the center of the ancient wood, and from it poured an inky black vapor. The vapor writhed as if alive, devouring the faint light and filling the air with a sulphurous reek. I found the Guardian by touch and tried to pull him away, but he remained rigid, transfixed by something beyond the door. His bandaged face tilted upward, and with a strangled voice, he spoke not to me, but to the darkness. "They will return." His words fell like a curse. Even as he uttered them, the great door exploded outward with a boom. I was flung backwards, skidding across the floor. For an instant my head swam. By the time I struggled up onto my elbows, silence had fallen as suddenly as the chaos began. The door hung ajar, cracked down its length. The blind Guardian lay motionless against the wall, half buried in debris. A crimson trickle ran from beneath his linen blindfold, but I could not tell if he yet lived. My own body cried out in pain, but I forced myself up, heart pounding. A heavy charnel darkness wafted from the gap in the doorway. It was as though night itself had been caged behind that portal and now seeped out, hungry and free. Somewhere in that darkness, just beyond the threshold, something moved. I could sense it there like a blot of deeper shadow, enormous and coiled. My elven sight, usually so keen even in gloom, could barely discern a shape amid the murk. Perhaps it was merely the billowing black vapor. Perhaps not. A sudden whispering noise broke the silence. 1,000 voices speaking at once, too faint to distinguish words. My blood ran cold. I realized with horror that whatever intelligence lurked beyond that door was studying me in return. I staggered backward, my boots slipping on dust and fragments of mosaic tile. Fear clawed at my throat. The final seal had given way. All that remained between me and the primordial entity was a half-splintered door and a gulf of darkness. The prophecy from Thessalonians flashed through my mind with dreadful clarity, as if the very air were murmuring it. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him, whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. A massive shape began to push against the shattered door from within, straining to emerge. I scrambled backward through the wreckage, my eyes fixed on the widening gap. The darkness itself seemed to bulge and take form. In that moment, survival instinct overwhelmed duty. I turned and ran. My boots slid on loose stones as I fled down the passage by which we had come. Behind me, the ancient door exploded into fragments with a splintering crash. I dared one glance over my shoulder, and immediately wished I hadn't. Something enormous was unfurling from the cell. In the glow of a fallen lamp's ember, I caught a glimpse of a slick, ebony hide and limbs that scraped against the vaulted ceiling. A pair of eyes materialized in the dark, like twin embers of ancient malice. They fixed on me, and a guttural hiss of myriad voices rattled the air. I choked down a scream and hurled myself around a corner. The tunnel ahead was caving in, chunks of masonry collapsing as the earth shook. Somewhere in the blackness behind, I heard the clatter of chains dragging over stone and the heaving gasp of a thing tasting freedom after untold ages. The very sound of it threatened to freeze my limbs. In my mind, I saw the Guardian's broken body, and knew I could do nothing more for him. I whispered a plea for the dead guardian's forgiveness as I fled. A hot blast of wind struck my back, rich with the reek of sulfur and decay. The entity was moving swiftly now, its unseen bulk scraping the tunnel walls. It was coming up, toward the surface world, toward Rome, and all those unsuspecting souls under the morning sky. Pebbles rained on my head as the ceiling cracked. I dodged and pressed on, lungs burning with exertion and terror. Ahead, a dim grey light beckoned, the pale glow of dawn filtering down a maintenance stair. I sprinted toward it, heart hammering. Behind me, a thunderous roar shook the corridor, a sound of triumph and unfathomable hatred. The force of it blew out the last of the sconces along the wall and plunged the passage behind me into total darkness. But I did not look back again. I climbed the narrow stairs 3 at a time, chasing that patch of growing light. Bursting through a half-open iron grate, I found myself in a quiet courtyard behind the great basilica. Cool dawn air hit my face. For an instant, everything seemed normal. The sky pearly grey, St. Peter's Dome serene against the lightening horizon. Then the ground shuddered violently. I was thrown to the cobbles as the earth across the courtyard erupted in a geyser of dirt and stone. An unearthly howl split the air, shattering windows. Alarms blared as guards and clergy shouted in panic. From the gaping wound in the earth, a column of living darkness unfurled. The thing's form defied comprehension. It was as if shadow itself had come alive, sprouting colossal appendages that blotted out the dawn sky. The bells of St. Peter's continued to toll wildly, as if in frenzied alarm. Around me, people stumbled from doorways, faces white with terror. Some fell to their knees praying, others ran blindly. I forced myself upright. What could I, with only a knife and fragile courage, do against this horror? Above, a shadowy tentacle lashed out, smashing part of the basilica's colonnade. Fresh screams rose. The demon of the abyss was free now, and nothing in the arsenal of men could stop it. Despair threatened to overwhelm me, but I thought of the blind guardian's final courage. He had given all to hold this horror back. I would not let that sacrifice be in vain. I drew my white knife and stepped in front of a cluster of cowering nuns, a futile but defiant stand. The entity's burning eyes swept over the Vatican as if savoring vengeance. My hand shook on the hilt of my blade. All the prophecies and dread portents had led to this moment. The day of horror no living soul expected to see. Above the din, a voice in my memory spoke with grim portent. Whether it was the echo of scripture, or the final whisper of the guardian's soul, I could not tell. But the words resounded like a doom, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Have you ever felt the universe go silent? Not from peace, but because something ancient just turned its gaze upon you. What if your search for divine knowledge led not to heaven, but somewhere else? Somewhere older, deeper, and far more honest? What if the only truth waiting at the end of your spiritual quest was a scream? A scholar once dared to find the face of God, and instead met something far more terrifying. Welcome to Tales of Mythology, where ancient legends, forgotten horrors, and supernatural wars come to life. If you love exploring the untold side of mythology, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell below, so you never miss another legendary story. He woke among roots. Damp soil clung to his palms, sweat to his brow. The forest was impossibly dense, trees ancient and breathing, their bark etched with glyphs from a language no human tongue remembered. Fog crept through the gnarled roots like living sorrow. He tried to remember his name, how he arrived, the memory resisted. A low growl echoed behind him. He turned and saw eyes. 3 pairs. First, the sleek grace of a panther, its eyes full of mocking elegance. Then the thunderous chest of a lion, golden mane like a crown of judgment. Finally, the skeletal frame of a starving wolf, its breath sour with ancient grief. They stalked him in a slow circle. He ran. Branches slashed his arms. The beasts did not give chase, they herded. The more he resisted, the closer they grew. His mind cracked under their silence, not knowing if they were spirit or punishment. His knees gave out beside a stream that ran backward, uphill, gurgling in reverse time. Then a voice. "You seek not mercy. You seek meaning. From the mist stepped a man. Not a man. A shimmer, like memory wearing flesh. He bore no wounds, but sorrow followed him like a second shadow. His eyes, though kind, were hollow. 'I am Virgil,' he said, 'and by divine sentence I walk again.'" "Are you dead?" the scholar asked. "No. Worse. I am understanding." The beasts watched from a distance, not moving, not blinking. "I tried to see God," the scholar whispered. You climbed where no mortal was invited," Virgil replied. "Now, like others before you, descend." The scholar stood, not to flee, but to learn. They walked. The forest wept as they passed. Branches trembled. A path unfolded, neither forward nor backward, but downward. At its end stood a gate taller than sky, carved from obsidian veined with rusted veins. Upon its arch, a sentence etched in cruel relief. "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." The wind vanished. Even thought went still. The scholar stepped forward. Inside there were no flames, only sound, wailing, murmuring. Curses muttered in 1,000 tongues. Shadows with no mouths screamed against silence. He turned to Virgil, trembling. "These? Souls who chose nothing. Cowards, apathetics. They would not serve heaven or hell. Now, they belong to neither." In the distance, a banner floated endlessly, followed by a stampede of the faceless. Hornets stung them. Worms fed on their heels. These were kings who ruled with indifference, priests who preached emptiness, philosophers who denied their own doubts. "Why do they run?" he asked. "They follow what they never chose. Now it flees them." Inferno, Canto the Third. They reached a river. Acheron flowed like mercury mixed with regret. Souls crowded its banks, their forms flickering like reflections in broken glass. A pale figure stood on a skiff, Charon, the boatman. His eyes glowed with fury as he beheld the living man. "You do not belong," he spat. "Return to your breath or sink in it." But then a tremor. The river shuddered. The cries fell silent. And for a moment, the scholar heard his own heartbeat. Then, not even that. Charon paused. Something unseen whispered to him. He stepped aside. Virgil nodded. "You were never meant to live blindly." The scholar stepped onto the boat, not with fear, but with a hunger for what lay beneath. As they reached the center of the river, the mist closed in again. Cold gripped him. The boat turned to ice beneath his feet. His breath froze mid-air and he collapsed. He dreamed not of fire, but of absence. Through me, the way into the suffering city. Through me, the way to the eternal pain. Through me, the way that runs among the lost. Justice urged on my high artificer. My maker was divine authority, the highest wisdom and the primal love. Before me nothing but eternal things were made, and I endure eternally. Abandon all hope, you who enter here. There was no flame in this vestibule of damnation, only the thrum of voices disembodied, colliding in ceaseless chaos. As he regained his footing from the swoon, the air struck him first. It was not wind, but an assault. Shrieks, chants, echoes of curses flung into the void, each a blade slicing reason. Language lost its form here, swallowed by a great roar of lament that came from nowhere and everywhere. The path opened wide before them into a plain of colorless dust. Above, a banner, blank and trembling, floated in endless motion, always ahead of the mass that followed it. That mass, he now saw, was a legion of the forgotten. They ran without purpose, eyes vacant, feet blistered and bleeding. their flesh torn by the barbed wings of swarming wasps. Blood and tears mingled, falling to their feet where sickly worms devoured the rot. He turned away, disgust rising from his stomach, but Virgil held him steady. "Look," the guide said softly, "this is not evil, but refusal. They never stood for anything. They denied both heaven and hell, and now they are denied by both. They passed a figure who once wore a crown, his jewels now eaten by larvae, his mouth sealed with wax. Another was a priest, his collar blackened, his hands bound behind him by rosary beads fused into his skin. A philosopher clung to a fragment of parchment, its words dissolving into ash with every attempt to read them. Not one of them cried out for mercy. They cried only to be remembered." A horn, distant but heavy, sounded across the plain. They approached the bank of a river, a wide, sullen current the color of iron. The souls gathered in fevered silence. Charon stood at the edge, gaunt and grim, his skin like cracked ivory, his eyes burning not with fire but with judgment. The boat rocked beneath his hand, though no wind stirred the water. He glared at the scholar. "You do not belong," he hissed. "This passage is not for those uncut from death. Turn back." The souls whimpered, shrinking from the ferryman's fury. The scholar stood frozen, not by fear, but by the terrible finality of being unfit for even damnation. For a moment, he wished for the beasts to return. At least they offered clarity. Virgil stepped forward, voice unwavering. "It is not he who seeks passage, but Providence who demands it. You must yield." Charon's grip on the pole trembled. The river shuddered. The air changed. A soundless quake passed through the vestibule. The soil split beneath their feet. The banner fell. The wind ceased. The swarm vanished. And Charon stepped back. "Go," he spat, "but you will find no welcome." The boat glided forward, seemingly of its own accord, and the two stepped aboard. The current moved without ripples. The souls left behind wailed in envy, not for salvation, but for movement. As they drifted, the cries of the vestibule faded. The river narrowed, deepened. The color drained from the air. The scholar looked to Virgil, who now held his eyes downward. "Why do they chase the blank flag?" he asked. "They followed nothing in life," the guide replied. "And so, in death, they are cursed to pursue nothing. Forever." He turned his gaze back to the water, which now reflected neither light nor shadow. The cold crept into his limbs. The fog thickened. They reached the river's heart. There, the current stopped. The surface of the Acheron turned solid, ice spreading in fractal veins. The cries vanished. No echo, no breath, only stillness, deep as creation's first silence. And then, darkness took him again. These wretches, who never truly lived, are mingled with the coward angels who neither were rebellious nor were faithful to God, but stood apart. He awoke not to screams nor to the sound of water, but a silence so complete it felt alive. No wind stirred, no breath echoed. Even his heartbeat seemed distant, as though it had been left behind on the other side of the river. Before him stretched a vast meadow cloaked in perpetual twilight, lit not by sun nor moon, but by a dull glow that seemed to emanate from the air itself. "This is Limbo," Virgil said, voice low and unburdened. "The first circle of hell." It did not look like hell. There were no chains, no flames, no cries of agony. The air was still. A faint breeze touched the grasses but carried no scent. Trees with silver bark swayed gently, as if asleep. Souls wandered here, many seated beneath the trees, some in clusters engaged in muted conversation, others alone, staring upward into a sky with no stars. "They feel no pain," Virgil continued, "but they also feel no joy. Only the weight of eternity, and the echo of what might have been." The scholar took cautious steps forward. The ground was firm, the light even, the peace deceptive. This was not suffering, it was something crueler. This was the absence of God. He saw children, dozens of them, wandering without purpose. Their eyes were wide and solemn, as if they understood something he did not. A poet recited lines with no sound. A philosopher drew circles in the dust, then erased them again and again. He passed a group of men seated in a circle. At their center, a tall figure with a noble brow spoke in rhythmic cadences. Though no words reached the scholar's ears, one beside him gestured with furious grace, while another scribbled symbols in the air. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, Virgil whispered. Their voices had once shaped worlds, but now their wisdom echoed in a void that offered no reply. The scholar knelt before one who looked up and smiled. "What truth do you seek?" the philosopher asked, his lips barely moving. "I seek what lies below," the scholar said. "There is no truth in hell," came the reply, "only memory." The scholar turned to Virgil. "You said they feel no pain." "They don't. But they remember what joy felt like." He could now feel it. The ache beneath the stillness. A yearning so vast it could not scream. These were the souls who almost reached heaven, but missed the mark by moments, by fate, by birth. He saw the unbaptized, the just, the wise, all exiled not by their actions, but by time. They wandered not because they were lost, but because they were excluded. "Has anyone ever left this place?" the scholar asked. Virgil paused. His gaze wandered to the horizon. "Yes, once, long ago. A light came, brighter than morning. He was crowned in victory and bore no burden. He passed through the circles not to judge, but to free." "The harrowing," the scholar whispered, "the day hell trembled." Virgil nodded. "He took many, the faithful before their time. Adam, Moses, David, Rachel, but not us, not me." It was the first time the scholar heard sorrow in Virgil's voice. The poet who had guided him through the darkness now stared at the skyless void with eyes that could no longer cry. "Why weren't you taken?" he asked. "I had reason, not faith." They walked deeper. The twilight dimmed. The ground changed, less solid now, more like memory than earth. Figures passed in and out of vision, never nearing, never departing. The silence felt heavier. He knelt again beside a figure seated in solitude, a child, barely old enough to walk. The boy looked up and smiled, though his eyes were older than the world. He spoke a single phrase. The scholar did not know the language, but he understood. "He waits below," said the child, "not to torment, to explain." The scholar blinked, and the child was gone. No greater grief than to remember days of joy when misery is at hand. The descent was sudden. One step beyond the fading edge of limbo, and the world collapsed into storm. Gone were the muted meadows and quiet souls. Here, there was no ground beneath their feet, only the rush of air, a cyclonic force that howled with the voices of the damned. The second circle was not a place. It was motion, constant, violent, hungry. They stood upon a jagged ledge of obsidian, jutting from a skyless abyss. Around them, a vortex twisted with the weight of countless souls, hurled like leaves in a hurricane that never ceased. The cries were not of pain alone, but this, Virgil said, raising his voice above the wind, is where lust is punished, not for love, but for making desire the highest law. He did not need to explain. The scholar could feel it, the magnetic pull of the maelstrom, not toward death, but toward 1,000 half-formed embraces that would never complete. Bodies spun, tangled, ripped apart, never landing, never resting. He saw faces contorted in rapture and agony, eyes shut tight against memory. Some called out names, others called for silence. Among the swirling storm, figures passed too quickly to identify until one drew near. A woman, regal in bearing, with tangled hair and hollow eyes. A name came to him, Semiramis. Then another followed, cloaked in beauty, Cleopatra, her lips parted in silent invocation. Helen of Troy came next, her image fractured in the spinning gale, followed by Tristan, locked in pursuit of something that always fled. The scholar gasped as two souls passed closely, circling one another in tandem. They did not fight the storm, but moved within it, like dancers caught in the last step of a waltz. Their bodies never touched, but their eyes never left each other. He called out, "You? Together in this wind, who are you?" The vortex shifted, calmed momentarily. The two figures slowed and drifted toward him. "We are Paolo and Francesca," said the woman, her voice a breath inside the storm. "We read of love and became it. One kiss, and we never stopped falling." He had heard their tale, Two souls entwined by story, by the legend of Lancelot, cousins by marriage, lovers by fate, slain by betrayal.